Alright, welcome everybody. In today's video we're going to be talking more about OU Insights, one of the modules that exists for OU Campus. Insights is a great way to run automated reports that give you a ton of information about your site. You can check for accessibility and spelling issues, you can measure your SEO strength, manage your broken links, and much more, all from within the same location. What's really neat is that Insights can also scan files that exist on your production server, even if they're not managed by OU Campus. So this is essentially the all-encompassing tool to report about important data that will improve your site's accessibility, SEO rankings, and much more, making it an overall better experience for your web visitors. So once we've added Insights to our site, we can access it here through the Reports menu, all the way down at the Insights little tab right here. And once you open up Insights, you're essentially taken to the site summary screen, which is essentially the dashboard within this feature. This is where you can report on basic information for your site, everything from seeing the overall site score to, the name of the site and when the Insights last scanned it, and other things such as this. So we'll just kind of go through this screen first, and then we'll break down some of the subsections within Insights where you can actually go into the individual reports. So essentially, what Insights does is it splits its reporting into four main categories. You can see those underneath here: SEO, accessibility, links, and spelling. And within those sections, there are a bunch of different reports that, when run together, you will get kind of these scores here that are calculated through an internal algorithm to determine, how good your site is in all of these categories. The site score is an average, roughly, of those four scores, and you can track to see what your site score is over time. Obviously, a higher number is better, and it reflects that you have fewer errors or issues on your site. If I click on the site score number right here, it'll bring up a graph that will track our overall site score over time. Obviously, in a normal situation, this would probably be increasing over time, and as you can see, it looks like I'm running my Insight scan every day, as you can see by this date on the x-axis here. In addition, on the site score screen, you can also see if you have a robots.txt file or a sitemap.xml file added into at the index of your, or at the root of your site. And these are useful tools for search engines and things along those lines. Sitemaps are used by search engines to make sure that you're scanning the correct files, or make sure that the search engine is scanning the correct files. And robots.txt is a way for you to exclude automated web crawlers from scanning certain portions of your site. So if those files exist, Insights will note that, and if it does exist, you can actually click on it right here to actually view that file specifically. Another thing that's important to know about Insights is that you can share this data to any other user that has access to Insights. I can do so by clicking on the Share Report link up here in the top right, and essentially what this enables me to do is it enables me to send a quick little snippet of the site score report or the site summary report to any other user that has access to Insights. And this, just like any other message in OU Campus, can be sent via external email, or it can be sent to an internal messaging system within OU Campus. So moving down into the four subsections, the first subsection is SEO, which stands for Search Engine Optimization. This will report on a bunch of various information regarding, how well your web pages are going to be recognized by search engines and how well they could potentially be displayed in a search engine result page. If you scroll down, you can get a snippet of some of the reports that exist within this section, and you'll note that these scores will determine are calculated by how many issues exist. So, if I have 5 different issues of missing titles or duplicate titles or something like that, that would be reflected in the score, but also how many pages are being affected. So Just as kind of in the opposite situation, if I only have one issue, even though it may be present on 90% of my files, my sites or my SEO score isn't going to absolutely plummet just because it's a single issue. If I had more issues spread across fewer pages, that could potentially still reflect more poorly on my SEO score than the first situation. Accessibility is going to return information about accessibility. This is more or less the same information that you would find on a page-by-page level if you were running accessibility check through the page check or final check features in OU Campus. And the guideline that Insights runs its accessibility test against will also depend on the guideline that you've set in your account settings for accessibility check overall. Links will check for broken links, just as you'd probably expect, and then spelling will check for misspelled words. So these two reports are a little bit more straightforward, have a couple fewer components than the SEO section, which, as you can see, has quite a few options. So that's essentially the site summary report. It gives you basic information at a glance for your entire site. Let's drill into some of these sections and talk about what some of these reports look like and what you can do. So moving into SEO, there's actually 4 subsections within the SEO section. So we'll just kind of look at all 4 of these and see where things go. First of all, into titles, we have 4 reports under the titles section. This first one here is called duplicate titles, and this essentially is just going to look for any titles that are the same across numerous web pages in your site. So essentially what this is doing is it's just wanting you to make sure that all of your titles are unique, because search engines may rank things that are unique higher than things that have duplicates across your entire site. So as we can see, each one of these little panels right here that I've highlighted would reflect one instance of a title, and then you have your little table here that determines how many pages have that exact title, and then you have a couple options. So if a page is managed within OU Campus, you're going to have this link that says edit page right here, and if I wanted to click this, for example, to potentially edit the title, as you can see, it takes me directly to the page inside OU Campus, so I can make that change very quickly. If I also go back, my other option is called Page Report, and this Page Report just allows me to view all my reporting data for the same exact page inside Insights. So if I click on this, you can see it takes me to my history page, and then I can look at all of the reports that have been run for that exact page. So we'll look a little bit more at the page reports later, but essentially that's just what this link does. So pretty much those are the options that you're always going to be faced with whenever you're looking at a page inside Insights. The only difference is that if a page is not managed through OU Campus, you won't get the edit page link, as you'd probably expect, because obviously you can't edit it within OU Campus, so why would you have a link that takes you to it? Just as a reminder, pretty much every one of these reports can be individually shared as well in the same method as we saw earlier. And as we can see, we also have a nice little list of how many duplicate titles exist and how many total pages are affected by this issue. And if you wanted to scroll down, you can see that each one of these cards, is reflecting here. The next report is missing titles. This one's fairly self-explanatory. Just shows you the files that do not even have a title at all, which are going to be ranked less favorably inside a search engine. Files that have long titles or short titles are based upon kind of the average length of title that can be shown on a search engine results page, such as like a Google search results page, but without actually truncating. So the determination is that a title that's longer than 70 characters is likely to have some sort of truncation or ellipses shown in the search results page, which is just a little bit less friendly. You want to make sure that your users can see the entire results page or the entire title without having it cut off anywhere. So essentially what this report does is it lists the title, it highlights in red the characters that are offending, so you can kind of make a determination whether it's worth adjusting to get it under that 70 character limit. And then of course you have your same edit page and page report options. Short titles is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that if it's a title that is shorter than 10 characters, you're figuring that Insights is telling you that essentially you're not taking full advantage of all of the characters that are potentially available to you on that page. So you just want to make sure that you're within a nice little sweet spot to where you're making an informative title, but just one that's not overly long. So those are the reports that we have in the title section. Moving on, you can look at the description ones, and we have 4 descriptions there, and they basically mirror the ones that are available inside of titles, except instead of titles, you're talking about descriptions. So we have duplicate descriptions, so any pages that have the same description as another page, it'll tell you what the description is and what your offending files are. Missing descriptions, self-explanatory, any page that doesn't have any description at all. And as we can see, there's quite a few options in this sandbox environment for me. A long description, according to OU Insights, is anything that's longer than 160 characters. So this is the same situation as titles. You just want to make sure that you're displaying the full description without having it truncate on your search engine result page. Short descriptions, same deal there, except this time a short description is something that has a description shorter than 70 characters. Once again, you want to make sure you're being fully descriptive and taking full advantage of what is available to you on that results page. So that's what we've got going on here with these 3 pages that are affected. And you can see the character count, so you can kind of figure how much more you can add to get it up above that limit. Moving on to heading tags, this talks about kind of the nesting or hierarchy of your headings. So if you have multiple H1 level headings, this might kind of throw off the hierarchy of your page, and search engines may not necessarily rank pages that have non-unique headings as highly as something that has a little bit more descriptive, even hierarchy. So, these reports are also fairly alike to the ones that we've seen before. It'll list the heading tag that is listed as a duplicate, and you can scroll through and see which pages are affected there. Any page that doesn't have an H1 on it whatsoever would be listed under the missing H1 headings report, and you would probably want to just go in and maybe add a simple heading right at the top of the page or something like that to differentiate these pages from one another, which is always helpful for search engine results. The final portion of the SEO section is keywords, and it's just going to list all of the meta keywords that have been applied to any pages within OU Campus, or to any pages within your pages, not necessarily the ones just in OU Campus. And it'll also tell you a count of how many pages have that keyword applied to it. So you want to make sure that you have a nice wide variety of keywords, but also you want to make sure that there's not duplicates or, synonyms thrown around as your keywords. You want to probably make sure that your keywords are more or less similar across the entire board. So I wouldn't want something that says university and then also have something that says college, for example, or in an instance of like certain athletic programs or something like that, or maybe certain majors in your system. You don't want to name one writing and name one English if they're actually meant to correspond to the same thing. So this report just allows you to kind of see that information more quickly at a glance, and then you can go ahead and make sure that that information has been adjusted later on. So now let's move on to accessibility. So inside accessibility, we have 2 reports. These are the known problems report and the likely problems report. Once again, just as a reminder, whatever accessibility standard you have defined at the account settings level inside setup account, that is going to be the check that Insights uses to check against all the files on your site. When you have a known problem, that's something that is verified to be causing an accessibility issue right now. What you're going to do is you're going to see the problem, so a particular issue. In this case, there's inappropriate header nesting. And then it's going to give you a very easy to follow repair, so you can fix the issue easily, and then it'll list the pages that are affected by that particular issue. So it pretty much groups things like any of the other reports we've seen before, for. Once again, you can see how many times this issue exists on a single page, but also your familiar buttons of edit page and page report. If you wanted to, you could also click on the problem itself, which is going to give you a more defined list of the error itself. So if you wanted to know more exactly by what's actually causing the issue, what you can do here is you can drill into, grab a little bit more information. But essentially the information that you're seeing here in the known problems and the likely problems report is the same information that you would see if you were running accessibility check on a particular page. The benefit to doing it through Insights is that you can view accessibility information across your entire site all at once instead of just doing it piecemeal on a page-by-page basis, which is very useful. The likely problems are similar to known problems. The key difference between them is that a likely problem is something that will probably cause an accessibility issue, but it's something that would need to be verified by a user. So it could cause a problem, and it's likely that it's causing a problem, but you just need to go in and make sure that, for example, the title doesn't actually contain placeholder text. The accessibility checker might determine that it's containing placeholder text, but that may not actually be the case. So anything with a likely problem, you have to kind of go in and manually confirm whether it is or is not causing an issue, because those are a little bit more subjective, perhaps. Once again, same situation, it'll list the problem. You click on the link for a little bit more information, and then you perform the repair on the pages that have been listed as causing an issue. You'll also notice if you run Accessibility Checker a lot, you'll notice that there's not the other option of potential problems. Those are once again more hypothetical issues than they really are verified things that are happening right now. So we just figured that it's not worth necessarily reporting across an entire site level through Insights. Now let's move on to links. We just have one report in here. This is the broken links report. Essentially what this is going to do is it's going to list any broken links that exist on your site and what their status codes are. So a fairly self-explanatory report there. If you wanted to do a little bit more information with regards to adjusting these broken links, the best course of action would probably be going up to the reports menu, and if you're an administrator, running site check and kind of see where these issues exist and potentially navigate to the pages where they are residing so you can fix them more easily. So this is essentially more of the same information that you would get if you were running site check. And then finally, spelling. This is just going to list the misspelled words that are across your entire account. So what you can do, you can see these reports. You can then add the words to the dictionary if you need to. So in an example of some words like this, Baymore and Beach Haven, those are probably city names or, perhaps even last names or something along those lines. Might be a good idea to go and add those to the dictionary because, obviously they're not real misspellings. They're just something that the dictionary doesn't recognize. So we have the option to add to the dictionary immediately through here, which is a nice little tool to be able to check this out really quickly. So now, the final portion of OU Insights is this page reports option right here. And essentially what this allows you to do is it allows you to view a hierarchy of all the pages that are being scanned by OU Insights, and you can drill down to specific pages within your site, say for example, recreation. And if I click on it, it's going to give me information about this page, and it will give me essentially all of the reports results that we just saw here in the sidebar, but now we're going to see it for this particular page. So we can see quick information like the title and the description and keywords. We'll look at the heading tags, and if there's any warnings here about the way that heading tags are nested, we'll get little notifications there. And we can also view accessibility information, see if there's any likely problems. You can see the potential problems will show up in the page reports section because it'll be a little bit easier to list them all. There's so many hypothetical situations that could cause problems that if we tried to list this for an entire website, it would be just huge. So that's why we're only doing it at the page level here. Once again, same thing like links and spelling. All of this is going to be listed on the page-by-page basis, and it's essentially the same information you would get if you were running Final Check and you were working on the page itself. Now, since this page is managed by OU Campus, I have a little bit more in-depth information here inside of this little top section here. It's going to be able to tell me what version is live on the production server, and also information about when the page was last published and by who, and also ditto for when it was last saved and by who. If this page was not managed by OU Campus, I'd still get all of my report information, but I just wouldn't be able to tell the version info or publishing or saving, because those things can't be tracked externally from OU Campus. Now, say, for example, I needed to go to this page and, do things like adding a description. I can just simply click on the Edit Page link up here in the top right. It's going to take me to the page, and then I can immediately go in and, for example, add my description here. All right. So going back to OU Insights, that essentially wraps up everything that you can see from within the interface here. Just as a quick reminder, we have the ability to share all of those reports. Each one of these sections here will contain the individual reports that Insights is actually running. And also, from within this site summary screen, you can actually go straight to one of those particular reports. Say I wanted to immediately go to missing descriptions, I could just go under the SEO section, click on missing descriptions here, and it's going to take me directly to that page. And that pretty much is what we've got going on from at least the perspective of being inside OU Insights. All right, so now that we've looked at OU Insights from a usage perspective and looking what it's going to be able to let you do from the actual Insights screen, let's talk a little bit about what you can do to configure Insights and manage who can access it, how often the reports run, and things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the Setup menu into Setup Sites, and then I'm going to just enter the site settings for, the site that I want Insights to be managed by. Down all the way at the bottom in the optional features panel, as soon as Insights has been purchased, you'll see that there's a checkbox that allows you to turn it on. Insights is turned on a site basis. So, one site could have it turned on, another site could have it turned off. And once that checkbox is turned on, I can then click Configure and adjust some information about it. So the first thing you can adjust, of course, is how often Insights scans your site. It can be as frequent as running daily, every evening, essentially. It'll run a site scan and give you a report when it's finished. You can run it weekly or every couple weeks, and then you can also run it monthly and have it run every, 8th day of every month or something along those lines. In addition, you can also control who accesses the Insights panel and everything like that by this access group restriction. So right now it's set to everyone. That means that everyone can access OU Insights, and it also means that every time Insights runs a scan, there will be an email that gets sent out to everybody inside my account, and they will get a quick at-a-glance snippet of the information that is presented inside of that site scan. So, you'll get like an overall site rating, you'll get site score, etc., stuff like that. If I want to change this group to a group like administrators only, that means that not only will admins be the only people who can access Insights from the reports menu, they will also be the only ones who can access the email, who will receive the email every time Insights performs a scan. And also, finally, they will be the only people who can receive a report. So if you're going to go into Insights and you want to share a particular report or something like that, you're only going to be able to choose from members who can actually access Insights. So if this was changed to admins only, that means that only level 9 and 10 administrators would be able to have reports shared with them, at least from within the interface. Of course, you can always forward an email from your external email client, but when it comes to sending messages or sending reports from within OU Campus, It's going to be dependent upon the access group. Of course, this doesn't come into play for the other reports in the system, like checked out content and pending approvals and stuff like that. It's just for insights. I'll change it back to everyone just for now. The final thing here is directory index. And what directory index does is it allows Insights to understand how your production web server interprets URLs that end with a directory as opposed to ending with a file. So an example would be having a link or a URL that was school.edu/academics/ and just leaving it at that, as opposed to school.edu/academics/index.html or something along those lines. Essentially what can happen is that, your production web server, if you have a URL that ends with a slash, it's going to redirect you to whatever the index page is for that directory that, was right before the slash. Essentially, we just need to tell Insights how the web server interprets those links so it can then follow any links that end in a similar manner. So if you enter in school.edu/academics/ and it resolves to a file that's called index.html, you would want to put that as the directory index in here. If you have a portion of your site that's not served up via index.html, but rather something like index.php, such as this, what you can do is that you can add multiple entries into this field inside Insights, because of course production servers can serve up multiple different instances of index pages. In the same way, we want to make sure that Insights is prepared to look for all types that you could have. So if most of your site is going to be index.html, but maybe there's a small portion that's index.php, you can put it in this order. Insights will first look for an index.html if it finds a URL that ends in a directory, and then if it doesn't find that, it'll try index.php. And if it finally doesn't, then it's going to not be able to scan the page. But hopefully that doesn't happen because you've prepared Insights for all possible circumstances using the directory index field here. You could also do something like default.aspx, however your web server serves up those pages. So that's what we can do from the optional features panel inside site settings. The other thing that I want to talk about is how Insights actually scans, or how it knows what pages to scan from within the system. And the way that works is that when Insights is purchased, there is going to be a file that's generated probably by the professional services team when they kind of implement Insights onto your site. And this file, it's called insights.txt, so it's just a text file. It's going to reside at the root of your site on the production server, and it's going to essentially just contain a list of all of the files that Insights is supposed to scan, both pages that are managed inside OU Campus and pages that are not managed by OU Campus. So if I go into my pages list view, hop over to the production server, we can see that I've got this file, insights.txt, and if I click on it, I can see that it's simply just a list of all of the links that I want Insights to scan. And then Insights will run through all of these, and it'll generate a hierarchy and stuff like that from that using, in the page reports section of Insights. In the future, once Insights has been implemented and maybe more pages have been made in the future, the way that we can tell OU Campus to scan those newly created pages is essentially by just downloading this file from the production server, perhaps using an FTP client, and then re-uploading it after you have gone in and edited and added the new names. The new links, at the bottom of this list. And then as soon as Insights scans again, then it will scan those new pages, and you'll be able to view reports on them from within the system. So just to recap, you're going to need to just go to the root of your site on the production server, edit this file, re-upload it with the new links once that's been done, and then wait for Insights to run another scan, and you'll be able to gather that data. Another thing to note, just make sure that you're not renaming or moving this file. There's no way for us to configure where to find this file. Insights just automatically looks for an insights.txt at the root of the production server. So if it moves, if it gets moved or if it's renamed, unfortunately Insights will not be able to function. Now, the final thing that I want to discuss is how Insights knows whether a site is, or whether a web page is managed from within OU Campus or from outside of OU Campus. Essentially, how that works is, let me just look at this index page here. If I view the source of this page and I scroll all the way down to the bottom, what we can see is that there is a little comment here called OUC info, and it's just got a UUID inside of it. That UUID, if it's added to a page and Insights scans that page, it knows that it's managed by OU Campus. So all of your files that are not managed by OU Campus will not have this comment, and Insights will treat it as a page that's not managed within the CMS. Now, there might be a situation where you have a page that you know is managed within the CMS, but it's not added, it's not showing up as editable from within OU Insights. The solution to that is pretty simple. That just means that the page has not been published since Insights has been activated for your site. The solution is simply to publish that page, or maybe publish that directory or the entire site, up to you. And that will add this comment to the production server, so then OU Insights, when it runs again, will notice that it's editable and will then give you that edit page button if you view that page from within OU Insights. So the simple solution is just republish the page, and next time Insights runs, it should show up appropriately there. So with that pretty much wraps up everything that you need to know about configuring OU Insights and doing a couple pieces of common troubleshooting. With that, I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial video, and we'll see you next time.